What's going on, nieces and nephew? Welcome to another episode of Uncle Dave the Handyman. Today we're going to be reviewing a video entitled, Am I Charging Enough as a Handyman? So this is another business perspective as far as charging is concerned from another YouTuber slash handyman that I have watched a few times in the past. And I've enjoyed a lot of his content. So we're going to review his perspective. I haven't seen this yet to see, are you charging enough, how he prices things, and how I see things from my perspective. I'm going to link his channel in the description of the video as well. And just to make sure I get it right, the Handyman Journey, that's the name of his channel. Honestly is what his business is, if I'm correct. So let's go ahead and jump right into it and take a look.
Hey friends, are you wondering how much money you should be making per week or per month as a handyman and how much you should be charging per hour? That's exactly what we're going to be getting into on this episode of the Handyman Journey. Hi friends, my name is Alan Lee, owner and operator of the Handyman Journey here in Sacramento, California. And the sole mission of the Handyman Journey is to equip people just like you how to start a handyman business or take their current handyman business to the next level. Today we're going to be talking specifically about the age-old question of how much I should charge as a handyman and how much I should be making per week or per month. Now, this is a huge topic. We've been talking a lot about it on our Facebook group, which is the Handyman Journey Mastermind group on Facebook. If you're not part of that, go ahead and join that. I will put a link in the description below to join that.
Okay, so he's got some groups going for
support. But we've been talking about, how much we should be making per hour, per month, per day, things like that as a handyman. And the question is very hard to answer for every single person because the economy changes so rapidly and so differently from area to area around the US or around the world. So we got a guy that is in Florida that his aim is to make $650 a week. And then we got people in California that maybe their range is to make, $2,000 or $3,000 a week. People in the middle might be making $5,000, maybe even $10,000 a week. It depends on your numbers. So the biggest thing that you need to do as a handyman is figure out what your hourly need needs to be. That's the biggest thing overall, and that's really what the answer to that question is, and that's where that lies, is figuring out what your hourly need is as a handyman.
Okay. Excuse me, I got allergies. So I'm wondering, is he saying more of a way to figure out what you are wanting to make in a day? I agree with some of the stuff that he's saying here, but if we're going to be talking about charging per hour as a handyman, and I guess I'll leave that discussion more towards the end of the video. I'm not the biggest fan of hourly, and we can get into that as we go along. Now, as far as demographics and where you are, does that have an influence? Yes and no. Meaning, the median income may be higher or lower depending on where it is that you are. But in my opinion, the going rate for a particular repair doesn't influence my prices at all. At all. I don't care who else charges what. I charge based on what I offer and what comes with everything that I offer. So it's not just going in there and repairing something. Okay. It's what else am I bringing to the table? What's my value added that I'm giving my customers, right? So let's take a look at where this continues.
And over at handymanjourney.com, I got a course where I explain specifically about this and give you guys the documentation to figure out what your hourly need is as well. But I'm going to kind of run that through real quick and give you kind of the rough and dirty on that so you guys can take some notes and figure that out for yourself. You're going to need to write down all of your expenses to start with, okay? And if you are a sole proprietor, you're going to need to figure out what your expenses are as a person and figure out how your handyman business can afford that, basically. If you're moving further into something like an LLC or an S-Corp and stuff like that, you're going to need to figure out what your business overhead is. But for those of you that are just starting out, you're pretty much probably going to be a sole proprietor. So you're going to need to figure out.
Okay, so sole proprietor meaning that you don't have a registered business, but you're working for yourself, which is basically a tax position to be in. An LLC or an Inc. is a different tax status, is what I meant to say. So that means you're working for yourself and you're charging customers for whatever work that is you do, but you don't have a registered entity separating you from the business that you're doing. That's what a sole proprietor means. Okay. So I think he's kind of saying here that you need to figure out how much it is that you need to make to survive. And that's a good number to have. Once you know what's your minimum, your monthly budget, this is what I need to survive, then that does simplify things a lot, right? And let's keep going to see where this is going.
What your numbers look like in the sense of your own personal finances, because you are the person who basically gets all of the money from the business, besides taxes and things like that. So you're going to need to create a spreadsheet, write down all of your expenses. So, and this also depends if your wife works or not, if you're married, if you're a single person. If you have a wife and maybe she's a nurse and she's bringing in a whole bunch of money and you don't necessarily need your income, then these numbers completely change. But if your wife, say, is a stay-at-home mom and you are the sole breadwinner in your family, you're going to need to pay very close attention to these numbers.
Well, I don't think it matters either way. If you have a spouse, if you have a partner, right, whatever the case is, you're splitting. If you live alone, it doesn't matter. It's still what your budget, your monthly minimum is your monthly minimum. Whether you're the head of the household and you pay for everything, or you have a roommate and you're just paying for your stuff, that's still your monthly budget, regardless of any way that you put it. But mentally, I get what he's saying. It does change, absolutely, because if you're the head of the household, then there's more weight on your shoulders, right, mentally.
You're going to need to write down, expenses like mortgage, groceries, gas, electric, health insurance, garbage, phone, all the, giving, car insurance, life insurance, registration.
Florida homeowners, if you have a power meter like this on the side of your house, you can get paid to go solar at no cost.
All this stuff, and then how much you want to put in savings and stuff like that, and write out everything that you spend money on per month. Now, this is, if you don't have a wife, or if your wife is a stay-at-home mom and doesn't bring in any income into the family, you're going to need to cover all of these expenses with your handyman business. So it's very important.
Again, your budget is your budget, whatever that is. Married, with kids, 5 kids, 10 kids, 1 kid, no kids, 2 dogs. Your monthly is what it is.
List out every single one. I have a list here of about 20 different expenses that I always recommend to start with. And then so that's your personal expenses. Then you're gonna need to figure out what your business expenses are. And that would include things like a business phone, truck registration, general liability insurance, advertising, taxes, licensing fee. If you're putting money into a 401k or a SEP IRA, tax prepare, how much does it cost to prepare your taxes? Giving, truck gas. I'm a big proponent on giving. I believe that we should tithe the 10% of our gross income. Give that back to the community, give that back to people in need, whether that is a church, whether that's an organization that you feel strongly about.
Admirable.
I think that is an important aspect of this business, is giving back to the community.
Now, as far as separating the business expenses, I always think that that's a positive thing to do, because at the end of the day, it does show you how much profit you're actually really making off of the job. It's still, since he mentioned this in the beginning, the context of this and who it's aimed at is to somebody who's just starting out their business, that doesn't have a corporation or anything. I think in the beginning, people don't really take those kinds of things into consideration, because all you're wanting to do is make some money doing that, right? So if you bring in a little bit more money as a side hustle while you transition into a full-time handyman, regardless of what it is, your monthly budget is what it is, and you're probably not going to be thinking about expenses at this time, right? But it is a good point to bring up.
Okay, so once you figure out that all of your expenses, you're going to have a number, okay? And then you're going to take that number and you're going to need to add 20% to that number. And this first 20% is what I call the business development break-even number. So it's a 20%, kind of an unknown figure. This is just to account for maybe certain jobs lost, certain jobs that take a little bit longer than we originally thought.
Tires, repairs.
Maybe materials were more expensive than we originally
things that come
thought.
up that you weren't expecting.
It's covering 20%.
If you're just starting out, you don't have a lot of experience, maybe budgeting, or at least keeping in mind that some of what you're going to be bringing in the beginning is going to go towards extra costs of repair materials, because you may not do things right in the beginning if you're just completely new. So maybe you were handy around the house, but now you're looking to make this into maybe a part-time and then eventually full-time income. You're going to mess things up, and customers may not like the way that it turned out. And that's cool, right? I mean, if you are just starting out, hey, everybody has a first day. But even with somebody who has a lot of experience, sometimes stuff happens and you need to repair it, and that eats into your profit.
Like unknown, or maybe that general liability insurance payment or that workers' comp insurance payment that we kind of forgot about.
That's way ahead of where this video had started out from. I get it. It's all good things, but are we gearing this towards, okay, you're making a transition into a full business. Now you're going to register everything and have business insurance. Or was this geared towards somebody who's just starting out as a sole proprietor, just independent?
Or that truck registration that we didn't put into here. So that the 20% kind of gives us a little leeway to make sure that we get our expenses covered. So you take that number of all your expenses, you add 20% onto it. That's your business development break even. So if you had every single thing in your expense category and you don't need that 20%, then that's awesome. Then that now turns into your business development, and that's money that you can set aside for business development. If not, then it's a break-even number. It's just covering your expenses. And then after that, you're going to add 20% on top of that number, which is your profit. 20% profit. I always recommend to aim for 20% profit or more, and this assures that you can get that, okay? So you're going to have your break-even number, you're going to have your 20%, and then you're going to write down how many average hours per month you typically work.
So I'm confused. 20% for profit on top of materials? Let's keep watching, but that's throwing me off a little bit, because if you're only making 20% on top of material costs and expenses, man, keep your day job.
Now, if you're just starting out, you're not going to know how many hours per month you work. But if you've been doing this for a month or two, you might have a good idea of it. Probably a good thing to do is, shoot for, 60 to 70%. So that means if you're working an 8-hour workday, you're probably going to be billing, 5.5, 6 hours, something like that.
Here's $100,000. Wait, I can give you this 100 grand, or I can teach you how to make this every single month. You see, this is exactly what
that.
6 minutes in and already 2 ads. Okay.
Because you have to allocate time for picking up materials, writing estimates, things like that. So you might have, 75 to 100 hours in a month. That's actually working hours. That's billable hours. Okay. And then you're going to need to divide that, and then you get your dollar per hour. So the dollar per hour is based on how many hours you typically work per month, and then what your 20% profit plus your 20% break even plus your expenses is. So you might come up with something, and it's different for your area, it's different for your expenses, so it's hard to give an exact amount that say, hey, you should aim for this as a handyman, because
everybody's
it's different
expenses
in every
and overhead is
single area
different
of the world.
for sure.
So your dollars per hour might come out to $20 per hour. Your dollars per hour might come out to $60 per hour. Your dollars per hour might come out to $80 or $100 per hour. It's definitely reliant on your expenses and also your community and where you live. And then, so that's another thing. After you figure out this dollars per hour, you really need to sit down and look at maybe the comps in your area, just like you would do if you're buying a house, right? You look at
comps, meaning comparables. How much are other people charging in your area for similar work? I think that's, in my opinion, it's irrelevant. Even more so when you're starting out, because you can't charge what somebody who's been doing it a while has been charging if you're going to be learning out of their pocket, meaning you maybe have been good around the house, but now you're just transitioning over to doing work for hire. Your quality of work is probably not going to be around there. So that number, even in the beginning, is irrelevant. But more so, even once you start getting more established, it's even more irrelevant. What other people around me charge. Don't set your income cap based on what other people are making. You have to change your perspective to say, this is what I offer. This is what I'm worth. These are my prices. And it's okay to walk away. If somebody doesn't want to, if they think that you're too expensive, you have to be okay with walking away. You have to be okay with taking that L and just saying, okay, I'm going to walk away from this. I apologize. If you change your mind, feel free to give me a call back. No hard feelings. Or if you ever wanted me to come back in the future to quote something else for you, you have my number, but okay, let's keep going.
Buying or selling a house, you look at the comps in your area to find out what other houses are going for, selling for, or buying for, and find out what other handymen are charging in your area, and say your number comes up with $75 an hour. And other handymen you find are charging around $40 to $45 an hour. Then you might need to figure out a way to maybe lower that hourly rate or bump up your experience level, bump up your value that you are bringing to your client.
Your value that you're bringing to your client. That's really what determines what you can actually charge, not how much somebody else or how much you think you want to make per hour. Per hour is a bad way to price out things. I would say even in the beginning, it's not a good thing, especially in the beginning. Charging per hour becomes a conflict of interest because now you're going to be learning out of their pocket, right? If you don't have a lot of experience, and what happens is that you're going to charge somebody per hour to do work, but if you're not efficient at what you're doing, you may take 2, 3, 4 hours to do something. Is that fair to be charging them for that? So they're paying for your experience, man. Just charge something, and then regardless of how long it takes you to get it done, do that. Figure out, okay, well, some of the things that he's saying is, figure out what your monthly expenses are, everything included, period. At the end of the month, to pay all my bills, minimum, this is what I need to make. And then I would like to make X on top of that to be able to save or to take out my partner to eat every once in a while, whatever the case is, right? Now that gives you a total monthly figure. If you divide that by X amount of days that you want to work in the month, let's say that's 5 or 6 days that you want to work. Now you know exactly how much it is that you need to make in a day, right? And if you have two or three jobs scheduled in a day, then whatever it is that number that you need to make in a day, you divide that by the amount of jobs that you have, and that's what you charge per job. That way you know exactly what you're making. Maybe you can be making a lot more than that. However, especially if you're just starting out, just charge them something that you feel that is fair for you and for them at that moment. And then even if it takes you 2 or 3 times as long as you were expecting it to take you, guess what? Experience isn't free either. And I don't think that it's completely fair for the customer to pay for the time it takes for you to get experience. It becomes a conflict of interest. I'm going to take longer, but I want to make more. So I'm charging by the hour. So the longer I work, the more you're going to pay me, while the customer is hoping that I work as little as possible to pay me as little as possible. That becomes a conflict of interest. Whereas you say, I'm going to charge you X amount to change your garbage disposal, even if it takes you 2 or 3 times as long, it's win-win. The customer wins, you got some money in your pocket, and then you got an experience, right? Some experience that is going to make you more efficient on the next one.
Because clients will pay for value. So there's always a way to get the money.
They will pay for value. Doesn't matter what people around you charge. What do you bring to the table? Your value.
That you need to get. And we want to show you exactly how to do that. So it's important to know these numbers. And really the conversation goes now from how much should I charge per hour to how many hours will this job take, right? Because if you know how many hours a job takes, you can plug that into this expense spreadsheet and figure out how much dollars per hour you should make on that job. So if you know that your dollar per hour for your break even, your dollar per hour for your profit is say $20, and this job's going to take you 4 hours, then you know how much to charge for that job. And I would recommend probably not charging by the hour, like not telling the client, say, hey, I charge $20 an hour. We're just going to go till we get this thing done. You could definitely do that. That's a great way to start if you don't have any idea of like how long jobs take. But if you have any idea of how long a job takes, and say you think a job will take you 4 hours, then you can say, hey, my hourly rate is $20 an hour, so I'm going to try and bid that job for $100, so that you're making a little bit more profit on that job than you would be if you were charging hourly. And on this spreadsheet, I also recommend writing out what your expense dollar per hour is, what your 20% unknown or break even value dollar per hour is, and then what your 20% profit dollar per hour is. That way you have three dollar per hours, and you know exactly how much. So if you end up doing a job that takes you longer than you originally thought, and say you made $22 an hour, but you look at your expense was $20 an hour, you still made $2 an hour over your expenses on that. You would definitely like to get into that 20% profit dollar an hour range, but if you don't, you're not beating yourself, you know. So it's very important to figure that out. That, I believe, is ultimately the end goal. But I think, so as a handyman, you should try and get at least what you were getting from your old job that you left before. I know, you know, the guy I'm talking about, Brian Davis in Florida, he aims to get what he got out of his old job. That's awesome, but you also have to figure in self-employment taxes and things like that.
Okay, so that's not a bad thing. If you first leave a job and you're just getting into this, which is why I'm confused that it seems like we're kind of going back and forth and more advanced, meaning you've been doing this longer, to somebody who's just starting out. We're kind of weaving back and forth on that. But yeah, charge, you know, if I think it gets confusing and it gets a little bit anxiety ridden when you're saying hourly. If you break it down into a day, I think that's, especially in the beginning, that's a little bit more manageable mentally, because you're not on the hour checking yourself and then beating yourself up because you should have been finished with this by now, or whatever the case is. Where if you say, I need X amount take home by the end of the day, especially when you're starting out, the experience is more important than how many hours you're doing it, because the more experience you have, the more efficient you become, the less time it takes you to complete a job, the more jobs you can do in a day. So ultimately, think of the future, not in the moment. Again, experience is not free, guys, right? But yeah, definitely get that number in your head of that daily figure, and then say, all right, if I'm going to have X amount of jobs today, then I split my daily between those jobs, and that's what I need to make.
And general liability insurance. There's a lot of expenses that go into owning your own business rather than just working for a guy. So,
hey, would you pay $50,000 to attend online classes at Harvard? Or would you pay less?
Important to know your numbers. You always want to calculate. That's the only way to make sure that you're making enough money. A lot of people, they just throw numbers out there and hope that they're making enough money. But you have to actually figure out what your expenses are before you actually know that you're making a profit at the end of the month. So
your expenses when you're first starting out, again, you're not going to break things down like you're an actual full-time business doing this, where you break everything down in mileage and all that. Just figure out how much you need to make per month. Break that down to 5 or 6 or 7 days a week. You have your daily number. Now that you have each job each day, you know that if I have 3 jobs, I'll divide my whatever amount it is that I need to make per day between those 3 jobs. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to charge that. That's the best way to do it in the beginning. Once you get more experience, now you can start setting your own prices per job, or I should say per repair. So if I'm going to do garbage disposal and I'm going to put casing around a door, and I'm going to change out a sink and the faucet, then I know I'm going to charge X amount for each one, right? But in the beginning, just again, know how much you have to make per day to be able to make a living at the end of the month, right? Figure out how much you need bottom dollar to survive, and then aim for more than that. But if you're just looking to get out of where you were working before and just move into this, if you're just making the jump and saying, I'm leaving that, yeah, how much were you making per day before? Try to make it that, if not more than that. But don't do things by hour. Just do things by day. That whole hourly thing, first of all, it's an employee mindset. And second of all, it weighs too heavy on your brain throughout the whole day, and it's energy sucking, to be honest with you. Whereas if you're just, the day can be as long as it needs to be, okay, for you to finish up your jobs and then go home for the day. But if hour by hour you're looking at yourself going, man, I should be done, or whatever the case is, that's rough. That's a position that you shouldn't put yourself in.
Very important. If you guys need more information on this, go check us out over at handymanjourney.com. We would absolutely love to get you plugged into the course for this pricing program. But this has been a little bit of tutorial of how much to charge per hour as a handyman and how much you should make per month or per week. I would probably say, you know, anywhere from whatever you need. If you need $500 per month, that's awesome. If you need $5,000 per month, that's awesome. But you need to figure out your expenses and what your need is. So I know I didn't directly answer that question, but
No, you can't answer that question, Lee. Obviously not. You can't answer that. We're all in a different situation. We're all in different positions or different points in our careers as far as handyman is concerned. So you for sure can't answer that question. So you know he's selling a product. You know, I think there was some good information. I think we were jumping back and forth a little bit between just starting out and already thinking about taxes and that kind of thing. That's a little bit more advanced right now in the beginning. If I take the majority of this video to be aimed at just the beginning, you're looking to survive, man. So if you're just looking to survive, focus on how much are my monthly expenses, divide that by how many days I'm willing to work in the week, which if you're just starting out, and especially if you just left your job, it better be 7 days a week, right? So whatever it is that you need to make at the end of the month, divide that by 7 days a week. Now you have your daily rate. Now you take your daily rate and you divide it by the amount of stops that you're going to make in that day. And that's how you charge your customers. Don't do the hourly thing because it's not fair to the customer at first. It's too much pressure on you. And the customer is paying for your experience. And that I'm not cool with, right? It's one thing to say, I'm going to charge you X. So he did have a point and say, guesstimate, right? How long it's going to take you. And then do it based on that if you're just doing that one thing that day. But I would try to get out of each job your daily rate, right? Or whatever that is. It is a case-by-case basis, but again, the other point of this is don't compare yourself as far as what or what other people in your area are charging. What value do you bring, right? What value are you bringing? And I think that's the end of it. So let's just take a look.
in your expenses. It's different for every person.
Okay, so yep, that's it. So there you go, guys. This was a quick overview of Honestly's handyman services. And again, I'm going to link his channel in the description. I've watched a few of his videos in the past, and there's good information in there as well. So yeah, leave me any comments or questions that you'd like me to answer. Maybe in the future, I can also do some videos of just me going over my mindset principles on pricing and running a business and that kind of thing. But in the meantime, guys, take home homework, get yourself out of that employee mindset. That hourly thing is not going to work for anybody. All right, nieces and nephews, this is Dave the Handyman. Thanks for stopping by.